Well, hi, everybody. Wishing you a very good evening. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to San Francisco Camerawork. I'll introduce you to Christina Graber, who is our esteemed gallery manager. Thank you, Christina, for being here for every one of these online events. We really appreciate your dedication to Camerawork, so thank you. And my name is Michelle Branch, and I'm the board president. And I am really pleased to be here tonight to see all of you and to welcome all of you. We are really honored tonight to showcase the work of artist Kija Lucas, and we will introduce Kija momentarily. But hi, Kija. Everyone wave to Kija, say hello. Excited to see you. Thanks for being here, gracing us with your presence. So I'll just tell you a little bit about SF Camerawork. San Francisco Camerawork is a nonprofit organization for all those who love photography. So that's a really big tent. And while I have your attention, I want to share a few exciting matters with you and events that are coming up. So we have our biggest event of the year that's upcoming, which is our San Francisco Camerawork Benefit Auction 2020. So we've been really working hard on this. This year, it's called See How Beautiful I Am, which is in recognition of the broad range of people who identify broadly as photographers and who we are proud to recognize. In the wake of George Floyd's killing and the desire to be the change that we want to see, we at Camerawork made a commitment to Black image makers and diverse image makers, but in particular, Black image makers. And out of that, our auction theme developed, See How Beautiful I Am, which is based on a line from the Langston Hughes poem, I Too Sing America, which was published in March of 1925. The goal of our auction is to move toward greater inclusivity and acceptance and recognition of the artist communities that make up the Bay Area and beyond. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about the theme of the auction and I Too and See How Beautiful I Am and where that comes from. So our auction launches September 10th, very soon, and runs through September 25th, and it's going to be completely online on Artsy. The auction's important, and I'm talking to you about it because it's part of our mission. It's our biggest event of the year. It's how we raise money for workshops, artist talks, award shows, member critiques, to pay our wonderful staff members, Christina and Senny. I see you, Senny, on here somewhere. I saw you texting. Thank you for being here. We were chatting in Zoom. And it's really our biggest fundraiser, so it's really important to us and important to the artist communities. This year, we are really proud to be showcasing about 60 works online from so many artists, including Kija, actually, and maybe some of you also who are on the line here with us. So we really thank the artists who are gracing us with their presence and their imprimatur and their work. With the auction this year, proceeds up to 50% of the work sold will go to individual artists, which is really exciting to be able to give back to the artist directly. So we have some talks and events that leading up to the auction. This is one of them. And we also on Thursday, stay tuned, have a talk with Professor Lee Rayford from UC Berkeley in the African American Studies Department, along with PhD candidate Delphine Sims and artist favorite Adrian Octavius Walker. So that's going to be Thursday at 4 o'clock, and that's called The Politics of Black Representation. Be really exciting talk that was actually curated by our board member Erica Gentry from City College. So don't miss out on that. Again, that's Thursday, September 3rd at 4 o'clock. We also will be hosting a fantastic, fabulous town hall event on the evening of September 17th, and that's going to be led by Adrian Walker. That's going to be led by Adrian Burrell, actually. So Adrian was the winner of our Forecast 2019 show. So Adrian Burrell and James Leventhal. So stay tuned for more there. So thanks for listening to those announcements. I wouldn't want you to miss out. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Kija Lucas, who has graced us with the work for the auction, as I mentioned before. Kija's talk tonight is called The Taxonomy of Belonging. Kija is an artist and educator who's based in the San Francisco Bay Area. She uses photography to explore ideas of home, heritage, and inheritance. And she's interested in how ideas are passed down in seemingly inconsequential moments, create changes that last for generations. Kija has shown her work throughout the Bay Area and nationally, including at the Museum of the African Diaspora here in San Francisco, Ingram Gilbert Gallery, Montalvo Art Center, and the Headland Center for the Arts. She's a member of the 3.9 Art Collective and the Curatorial Council at Southern Exposure. She received her Bachelor of Fine Arts from the San Francisco Art Institute and her MFA from Mills College. So I think Kija is a local Bay Area favorite. So welcome, Kija. I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really am excited to be here today. I just want to say I see some of my students' faces, and that makes me really happy. I feel so inspired by all of the photographers that I've gotten a chance to work with over the summer and in the semester at Mills. Cool. I'm gonna share my screen, and you can tell me if it's not working, because somehow I still don't trust technology. Are we good?
Yes, and the one
Okay.
thing I forgot to say to everybody and all of that is that Kija's gonna give us a talk and presentation and show work until about 6:45, and then we'll open it up to questions from everyone here. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I also want to say I just really love Camerawork. They're doing great work. And if you get a chance, go to Lee Rayford's talk on Thursday, because Lee Rayford is amazing and brilliant, and we should all be lucky to be able to listen to them talk. I'm gonna try to disappear this thing so it doesn't make me so nervous. Cool. So I just want to say that this is a weird time in the world. And people keep asking each other, how are you doing? And I think we still have to ask that question, but this is a hard time. It's hard just to keep it together. And I think as artists, we're always asked, what are you working on? What are you doing? And I just want to say I'm very thankful for deadlines for stuff like today, because if I didn't teach and I didn't have deadlines, I probably would be staring at a wall all day, every day, and eating cereal for most of my meals right now. So that's where I'm at. The Taxonomy of Belonging is a title of a chapter of a book that I read about trees in California, and I think it's also the title of the entirety of the work that I've made in my life. I think a lot about what does it mean to belong. I'm not sure I've ever felt that I did belong anywhere. I feel taxonomy is this way of categorizing things, and I just never quite fit into any of those. So yeah, I'm gonna go into my work. For those of you who have heard me talk about my work before, oh, is it working? Oh no. Oh, there we go. You might see some repetition and hopefully some new stuff as well. So I like to start my talks with this quote from Witold Drobczynski. This acute awareness of tradition is a modern phenomenon that reflects a desire for custom and routine in a world characterized by constant change and innovation. Reverence for the past has become so strong that when traditions do not exist, they are frequently invented. And I think that quote, it's from a book called Home, A Short Story of an Idea. And it really sort of, it made me think about my own life. And I grew up in the Bay Area. I was born in the very late 70s, and I came up in a time that was all about maybe the rainbow melting pot, and sort of being an individual in the world, and not really, I don't know if I was really allowed to or told about my own histories and the way that I fit into the world. There was a lot about being an individual and sort of personal responsibility and that stuff. And it wasn't until I got to, sorry, trying to figure out how to get to the next slide, and it's not letting me. There we go. Until I got to my undergraduate at the Art Institute, and I learned about the work of Carl Linnaeus, who was a botanist in the 1700s. And I didn't start this work in search of home for several years afterwards, but it was with his work in mind. Carl Linnaeus came up with the taxonomies that we use for naming botanicals, for naming animals, and he also was one of the inventors of racial classification. his work inspired a lot of other pseudoscientific racists in the US. They helped to sort of justify to themselves why it was okay to do really atrocious things, enslaving Africans and colonizing the US. So this work, I take botanicals that are from all different places. Roadside weeds. This is a roadside weed from San Francisco. Actually, this is one of the first images I made in this body of work. And when I scanned it, I made these on a flatbed scanner. And I'll talk about that a little bit. When I scanned it, I realized that there was like a bug on there when I zoomed in really close. And I kind of freaked out because I had to look up what a bed bug looked like. It turned out to be a stink bug, so it was okay. And with these works, I am really looking at the way that scientific imagery, like how scientific drawings looked at botanicals, etc. And I'm trying to flatten the hierarchy that was created by these colonialist ideas with Linnaeus creating this racial hierarchy. And it was incredibly racist the way that his taxonomy was. I traveled to 5,000 miles through 13 states to create this work. And I was influenced a lot by the work of Anna Atkins. She made these cyanotypes using Linnaeus's taxonomical names. So the cyanotype, for those of you who don't know, is a contact way of making prints. So she would coat paper with light sensitive material, put the botanicals on top, put glass on top of that and expose it to the sun, and then fix it with water. My works with the flatbed scanner, I actually took a flatbed scanner through the US, through all these places that are historically significant to my family, and use that as like a contemporary way of making images, similar to like a contact images. It's not a contact print, but I felt like it was close. So I flew to New York, and then I put the scanner in the trunk of a rental car, and I drove all around. I met a lot of people, like cousins, related strangers, who became family on the way. This is a picture of the eucalyptus. I grew up in the Bay Area, and eucalyptus is very common here. It's a contentious plant. It's one that the name of the book, in the book about the history of trees in California, is named after, right? So eucalyptus was brought here. It's an introduced species. This work uses cultivated plants, introduced species, what we call invasive species often. It uses things that we consider beautiful and useful, and then also things that we feel like should be eradicated. So this, here's another eucalyptus. These images are printed about 30 by 40 inches. And the eucalyptus is thought like not to belong here. There's a lot of conversations about it. I won't say one side is right or not, but I'm very interested in that, like how something is brought to a place and then decided that it does not belong and should be eradicated. I think a lot about the language that we use around botanicals and how it's similar to the language we use around human beings and different groups of people. I come from a mixed race family, and because of the history of the United States and this taxonomical stuff and pseudoscience and all of the things, different parts of my family have experienced being in this country in very different ways. And so these botanicals are a way for me to talk about that. Now, I said that I used the flatbed scanner, and I was like looking at a lot of scientific images. And at a certain point, I thought, well, I had been making them very clean. I created a lot of rules for myself. And at a certain point, I decided, actually, I'm going to start throwing a bunch of stuff on there. I like to create rules for myself in the beginning, and then I like to break them. And so this piece was the first one, I believe. It was botanicals that came from Buxton, Iowa, which is a company mining town where my great-grandfather, John Brown Lucas, had a bakery and a market there. It was one of the first integrated towns in Iowa. And on the top left-hand corner there, you see that is ragweed. I don't believe I'm allergic to ragweed, but when I was on this trip, what I would do is I would go and I would clip botanicals, and then I would bring them into where I was staying, if it was like with a family member or a friend or in a hotel room. And at night I would make these scans. And so when ragweed goes through your air conditioning, like circulates through it over and over again, it's not good, even if you're not allergic. I woke up with my sinuses very swollen and not feeling very well at all. So 2 weeks into my road trip in 2013, I made this picture. It was the first one that I believed that I knew what I was doing with this work. This is a piece of dirt from Bristol, Virginia, where my ancestors were enslaved. I went to Bristol. I hooked up with the historical association there that was restoring a building there, some property that was owned by the slaveholders that owned my ancestors. They let me on the property. They talked to me about the history there. They kept asking me which one of the many John Prestons, and I didn't care about them. I cared about my ancestors, the people who had been enslaved there. And I was sort of trying to figure out how to be in this space. I forgot my CF card, which was, I forgot it in my hotel room when I was there. And so after I was done talking to them, I said, could I come back here later by myself? And I was lucky that it was in Virginia and not in California, because it was a construction site. And they said, yes, you can come back later by yourself. And so I had to just make sure that the fence looked like it was locked, as it looked. They never actually locked it. So I came back later in the afternoon. We're in Virginia, so in the South, in August. I am from California. I'm from the Bay Area, as I said, and I am not used to that humid, hot weather. Oh my goodness. My pants were sticking to my legs. My eyelids were sweating. And I was questioning everything about myself and like what on earth I was doing there. I had done a fundraiser for this work, and I was just like, what are you doing, Kija? People gave you money to make this work. Is it even interesting? And I don't know if you guys ever feel that questioning of yourself while you're creating something, but I definitely do. And I walked around, I made some botanical clippings, I took some pictures with my camera, and then I was packing up my car. One of my favorite things about traveling around the country was looking at the sky. It was so beautiful that day, like really pregnant with water. And I was sweating, packing up my car, and like questioning myself. And through the clouds came this ray of sun that shone on this piece of dirt that was from beneath the foundation of the house that was being rebuilt. This red piece of dirt, and it was like the sun was shining through and singing at it, just like in the movies, just like, ah. And I walked over and I grabbed it and I said, that's my fucking dirt. And I picked it up and I brought it back to the car. And this is the first picture that I made that I really knew that I knew what I was doing. And I believe that my DNA is in this dirt, that my ancestors bled and sweat into this land. And that is why this became one of the the first picture that I had confidence. I believe they were telling me something there. Oops, I keep pressing the wrong thing. This is a petrified piece of wood, also from Bristol, Virginia, underneath what's called the resting tree there. There are a number of stones there, which I believe to be marking graves. I spent a lot of time underneath there convening with the ancestors as well, and made this photo of that. One of my favorite things about using the flatbed scanner to make pictures is the way that the light sort of is this like really beautiful and even light. It sort of reminds me of like the Dutch masters paintings sometimes, just like this gorgeous light. This image, you'll see a lot of my work. I'm not concerned with like those scientific images are like these perfect, supposedly perfect idea of like what this thing is supposed to look like, and that is not what I'm concerned with. So these leaves are not at their prime, but they look so Baroque and just really beautiful to me. I don't have a background in horticulture or botany, and so oftentimes I'll worry myself whether I'm going to accidentally take a clipping of a poisonous plant. This is, I went back to certain places on my road trip. So I went back to Grinnell, Iowa, where several generations of my family lived, to residency, and I made this image there. I had actually scanned this botanical earlier in the residency, and then I had put everything on a shelf in my studio there, and then it started like having so much pollen, so I kind of just thwacked it on top of the scanner and made this image, and then I picked it up and made this one. So that's pollen. This is the one that I have that doesn't have a black background. It feels kind of hopeful to me. I made this at Montalvo Art Center, looking at a blue sky. I never was able to recreate that blue sky, but you can see how the botanical piece is like moving, and we're getting these like RGB lines in there. The digital artifacting is really important to me as well, like to show the imperfection, to show the way that what we believe is real is not necessarily real. What we believe is truth is not necessarily truth. I feel like photography is a place that people make assumptions about truth, but that makes it one of the best places to lie. And photography was used a lot early on to lie, and even today as well. So we always have to question what we're looking at. This is from Montezuma, Iowa, which is outside of Grinnell. Also from Montezuma. This thing could have really hurt me. It was really prickly. Again, these pieces are 30 by 40 inches, most of them. There's some that are printed at 20 by 24, but they could be 12 feet tall. I have printed some of them, one or two of them on vinyl to put onto the wall. And I liked seeing them in these different sizes. Like there's something about them where they still look like the object is there. You can see again, like I stopped cleaning them up. I stopped trying to make them perfect because there's nothing like that is like a impossible thing, and it also is less interesting to me. Okay. This brick, so I started collecting different artifacts that weren't also botanical. So this brick is also from Buxton, Iowa. I drove out there, and now it's like on a gravel road in Iowa, and it's like way out there. By the time you get there, your cell phone stops talking to you, and you're just like a little blip on the screen, and it's like mostly growing corn, but a little bit of weed as well. I can't tell if it's on purpose or ditchweed, but I took this brick from there. This is a little piece of mud from the side of the Mississippi River in Helena, Arkansas. And this is from New Orleans. This is one of the ones where I just started like scanning each of the botanicals separately and then throwing them all onto the scanner together, and it becomes this wildness, this impossibility to categorize. I want to break apart naming and categorization with my work. I think that's very important. When I say that I'm interested in heritage and inheritance, it's not like a set of silver that was passed down, but it's the ideas that are passed down, how my 7th generation great-grandmother's experience has everything to do with who I am today, how things are passed down through our DNA, but also the way that we behave with one another, how the way one's life experience affects another's. Here's another one from New Orleans. I like this one. It feels like it's underwater for some reason to me, although it's not. So the next body of work that I'll talk about is called Collections from Sundown. And this is the only one that I feel like I have wrapped up. Everything else that you'll see, I feel like is ongoing. So I haven't been out making botanical clippings and scanning, but I do plan when the, I want to say when the pandemic is over, but once we have a vaccine or a viable treatment, I'd like to go back and continue that work. This work is about my grandmother who lived with Alzheimer's for 11 years. She would collect her things, which is why it's called Collections from Sundown, because she had what is called sundowner syndrome with her Alzheimer's. So this is a note she wrote on a paper towel. Sorry we had to leave, but it was getting late and we had to get started on our trip home. Maybe we'll get together before long. Wanted a chance to get to talk to you. Best wishes for all. So my grandmother had lived in the same house for the last 55 years of her life. But because of the Alzheimer's and sundowner syndrome, she always believed that she was going somewhere, that she was getting picked up. Sometimes she thought she was at a train station, and she would pack her belongings. And so my mother, thanks Mom, I know that she's on here. I don't thank her enough or anything. But she was my grandmother's main caregiver, and I would ask her, could you please photograph with your phone the collections that she makes? And then I would go back to her house when I would visit and make still lifes from them and photograph them. So this is from a day when my mom said, Grandma was carrying around like every coat she owns today. So the first image I made was more orderly, but I didn't end up liking it. It didn't make any sense. So this one made more sense to me, this pile of coats. Sometimes I would go and open her suitcase and photograph what was inside. I consider this work to be a collaboration with my grandmother, and it was an unwitting collaboration. And I feel like as a photographer, I have to be very conscious of how I represent another person, especially when there's no consent there. So I try to be as respectful as possible. So if anything seemed too personal, I would hide it, but I also had to go to a certain extent in order to make sure that I was getting the ideas across and showing this this way of what she was going through. So this is a wallet she made with a green pin, a hearing aid battery, and a $20 bill. She would carry this around. She didn't spend money anymore. She had somebody who would go to the store for her at that point, but she still would carry it around. The hearing aid battery always makes me laugh because she never wore her hearing aids. She hated them so much. So once she had caregivers more, not full-time, but more often, she would, she stopped having a chance to collect so many things. And so I started photographing her notes. And so I had to ask my mom very early on, because I would see these notes on the kitchen table, notes on the counter in the laundry room, that she would write to herself, or she would write to one of us. And I asked my mom, could you just throw them in a shoebox or something? Someday I'll do something with it. And when she stopped collecting objects, I started arranging these notes and reading them and trying to go through them and trying to organize them into categories. But they're impossible to fully organize. But a lot of it is her handwriting. This one's called How to Be Funny. She used to write. When she finished, when she retired, she would take these writing classes. She took them into her early 80s. She didn't get Alzheimer's until her 80s, so she was able to like be very lucid for a very long time in her life. But she borrowed a book from the library called How to Be Funny. And to me, like, I have to look at the funny parts about these notes. There's like a doctor appointment postcard in there with one note to my mom that says, Esther, I don't feel any need to improve my memory at this time. Let's cancel. And then I believe on the other side of that, my mom wrote to her, we went to this appointment yesterday. And as heartbreaking as it is, it's also kind of funny. And I feel like you have to laugh or else you might cry. So this piece is called Ask Esther. It's all notes that my grandmother wrote to my mother, and then other things that I thought fit with that. So like asking her what to do with that. It's also, there's a note about how to fold about the American flag from her brother who died in World War II. This one is called Taking a Walk, and so there's different maps that she wrote. She would draw a map and go to places where she knew, or she would go on these walks and she knew how to get where she wanted to go, but then she would have to remind herself so she didn't get lost after because of her illness. A lot of the things are reminding herself of things that so that she would remember, but then also so that she could ask us something, but also to like, I feel like there's some, when you know that when a person has Alzheimer's or dementia and they know that that's happening with their mind, they sometimes do certain things in order to try and remember and try and also not worry their family and not worry themselves as well. So try to take a bath or a shower sometime today. My keys are in my wallet tonight in the drawer with my green headscarf. So very specific notes. I also just really love the way that this note got wet and the blue ink from the lines in the paper sort of melted into one another. So the next body of work that I'm going to show you is actually up at California Institute of Integral Studies, and there are appointments that you can go and see the work, and also is an ongoing body of work called the Museum of Sentimental Taxonomy. I've been photographing people's sentimental objects since 2014. I'm very interested in the things that we hold on to, like I said, like ideas, but also objects that we hold on to. So these are all different, in a piece like this, it's all different people's objects. It's not one person's object all together. Some people will bring one object and some will bring multiple. Some people will come several different times in different places where I'm photographing. So most of the times when I exhibit the work, I try to also have hours where I'll be available in order to photograph objects from people. We have many, many museums. Here's an exhibit of this work that was at Montalvo Art Center in the South Bay that actually went dormant in the middle of COVID, and we picked up those pieces and then added some at the CIIS. So there are several people who are like making decisions about what value is, what's valuable, what's important to hold on to, and they're telling the stories about what those meaning of that thing is. And to me, I think everyone's objects of sentimental value are important, and everybody's histories are important. So I usually set up a backdrop and ask people to come to me with their objects. Some people bring one, and like I said, some people bring many. And I photograph those objects and then arrange them together in these pieces. I'm going to tell you guys some stories. Oh, here's some installation shots from CIIS. I'm really excited about this. I ended up making several new arrangements for this. So the Black Times was a magazine with an artist in San Francisco. His dad actually ran the magazine in Baltimore in the 70s. And there's all kinds of interviews and different stuff. And this, the gentleman who brought this in, he has been actually like trying to collect past issues because he doesn't have a full set. But he brought this, this magazine in. This is a rolling pin. It belonged to a young woman who her grandmother had given it to her mother when her mother moved to the US from Finland, and then her mother gave it to her when she moved from home to go to college. And she bakes a lot, so I feel like it is like a perfect thing because it's well used as well. 2 rings, broken auto glass, and semi-precious stones in a tin. 1 ring is engraved with yes and the other no. The person who brought this in, his long-term boyfriend asked him to marry him, and the boyfriend said no. Sometimes our sentimental objects are not something that bring us joy. It might be something that's much heavier in our life as well. This is the carcass of an English starling that the participant brought it in. He's had it for 20 years or so, and it comes from a beach on the shore of, I want to say, North Carolina, where he grew up, going to the beach there, and he lived there, and it's been in like every home that he's had since then. On the left-hand side is the last meal that she cooked with her grandfather, and on the right-hand side is the ephemera that she collected on the day of his funeral. This is a personal one. Oh, I did not mean to have it outlined in white, but oh well, it looks great anyways. This is a book that is mine. It's my sentimental object. It was given to me by my father, who passed away when I was 19 years old. I looked for a very long time for something that my father had written to me. I knew he always wrote notes or a birthday card or wrote inside of a book, and somehow I did not hold on to any of those things. And a summer or 2 ago, my older brother was reading James Baldwin's Notes of a Native Son, and he says, "Kija, I have your book." And I was like, "What are you talking about? That's not my book. I don't have that book." And he said, "No, it is your book. It was on Mom's shelf." And he opened it up, and this note is inside in my dad's handwriting, which is so beautiful, and I had to read it to my teachers growing up because they couldn't read it. And it says, "Dear Kija, I hope that you will find something in this book that is all too hard to find." And it either says "another light" or "another fight," which is kind of perfect for my relationship with my father. And then it says "Happy birthday, 94, love always, Dad." And so he gave that to me for my 16th birthday. And I somehow have no memory of it. But I hold this object dear. So I did this project in a residency in Wassaic. Well, that was the first time I did in a residency, and I set up in a bar there and had people bring stuff in. So here is a pile of wolf shirts. The guy who owned this, he had owned many more wolf shirts, and he said his friends would ask him for them. So, and I thought that was funny. I've never asked someone for a piece of clothing they were wearing, but I thought it was pretty great. I'm gonna just go through a couple more of these, and then I know I'm supposed to stop. A hummingbird nest from a woman whose her daughter was 1.5 years when this photo was taken. She said her husband found it the week she was born, and her daughter was practicing being gentle when she was holding it. And then I'm gonna just quickly go to this because it's, this is a dictionary. Oh, I went really fast. I'm trying to go to the next thing. A wedding ring drawing by his daughter that he wears on him. Sorry, I'm going so fast. So I when I was trying to figure out how to show this work, I thought about this, The Pencil of Nature by Fox Talbot. And so this is a book, sort of like how to prove that you owned something and its value. A Bible from the 1700s that has all of his family names in it. These are what the vitrines look like inside. Really quickly, I'm so sorry. This is so annoying of me. Smolder is another body of work. I just think it's really important to talk about this right now.
This is your talk, so please take your time.
Okay. So I'm gonna just talk about this for a couple of minutes. This is actually, so Smolder is about the wildfires in California. I've been going to collect things from the aftermath of the wildfires that have been happening. The last 5 years have been, I believe, like, I don't know, in my whole life living here, just seemed to really stand out to me. So these are also, again, with the scanner. This work and the first body of work are both with the scanner. There's a lot of digital artifacting, etc. No photographer ever wants to borrow my scanner because it's so dirty. But our world is really being affected by various things, including climate change, and like our desire to be a part of nature, which I believe that we are, but not doing the right, I don't know, like we want to live inside of nature, but we're not letting nature do its thing. And we somehow want to control nature, and it is not something that is controllable. All of these things are contributing, and that's kind of what this work is about. It's the newest work, even though I've been working on it for 4 or 5 years, and it's probably like the most difficult for me to talk about because I don't necessarily always know how. This is the piece that's going in the Camerawork auction. It's a little brighter. Actually, I was working on this body of work in 2016, and then the 2016 election happened, and I was looking around my studio, and I said, this is so fucking depressing. And so I called my friend Alicia, and we went to find some things that were green growing out of the aftermath of the fires. Anyhow, so that's that. And I'm gonna stop. Okay. I don't know where. Christina, can you stop my screen from sharing because my mouse is not showing me where it is? Is that possible? Or I can just take questions on here.
Yeah. So Kija, first of all, I just want to thank you and give you a round of applause now before we enter into questions. So thank you so much for sharing your work with us.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
Yeah, we're so appreciative, and you're such a close and poetic observer. It just feels like when you photograph work, you really revere it and honor it. It takes on such an elevated position in so many ways, even something as what would seem mundane as dirt. And what I find really interesting is that when you talk, you have such a story for each of the images that you present, which I think is really amazing. And so it made me wonder, I'll ask the first question, and then I'll take questions from the chat, is how do you name your work? Because it seems that the works are so evocative. So, and you don't want to categorize. So I'm just curious how you think about your naming conventions and how, if you've struggled with that at all.
So very early on in photography, one of my teachers told me don't get too like out there with your names. And so I am very like basic, like this is what it is. But like Smolder is named, every piece is called Smolder and then a number. And that number is just like whatever number it was on my scanner. The same with In Search of Home. It's like In Search of Home, the place where it is, and then whatever number it was on my scanner. And then the Museum of Sentimental Taxonomy, those are named after the first name, the age, and the city of the person who brought in the object. And then the only ones that I come up with names for are the ones, well, she actually came up with the name. So the work about my grandmother, Collections from Sundown, it's all named from a note in the work. So like a line from a note. So it's easy to find when I'm looking for. Yeah, so that's how I do it. Because I remember just hearing like, you don't want to name something like absolution or something like that. Because you're like putting too much on the image. So it's really basic. When I was in grad school, I would name things like male on a chair or something like that, like exactly what is in the image.
Thank you. That's great. I just love listening to the stories of each of the images. It's like really wonderful.
Thank you so
And
much.
hearing your thought process. Yeah, let me take a question from the chat here. So Gabby R says, these are really interesting bodies of work. They're lovely, haunting, and innovative. How did you choose and group the objects together that you used and photographed in your body of work with the individual pieces in boxes? And will you be exhibiting those again, maybe? So I think maybe that's the Institute for Integral Studies.
Oh yeah, that work is up right now, and it's a traveling exhibition, so hopefully I'll have a next place to bring it to. So it's up in San Francisco, and you can make an appointment, I think, on Fridays. You have to email them, and I will be there to meet you, and I can tell you some stories if you want to hear them. So that work, I began sort of organizing it by, I was trying to like be like, oh, let's keep myself out of this. And I actually think that's impossible. Even if you're photographing, you're showing some of your perspective. So I was like, at first I was trying to do it chronologically, but then when I started making the work for the vitrines, that was pretty impossible. So I tried to put stuff in by the shape of the object rather than saying like, oh, I'll put this next to this and that will evoke something for people. I want to pretend that I don't have any say in that, because that's like, this is like sort of after like looking at museums and how they exhibit work, and museums also, and photography and science, all of these things have this like false notion of like not having an author, which isn't true. So I just sort of wanted to like go in there and like sort of make it feel a little bit like that, but it's honestly not true. There's probably something inside my head that is like driving it, but I try to go by like what fits together with the shapes and the colors, and then hope that, and then having also making sure there's things from different places in the vitrines as well. But a couple of the pieces are definitely like ones in the frames are definitely all from like a certain space where I photograph the objects.
I have another question here. There are a couple questions that are related about manipulation of images and whether or not you do, and you can answer or not answer. And then also, how did you come to the aesthetics of the black background? For this person, Jeremiah Barber, it evokes galaxies. And this person is curious about, how you found your way into that style of image making.
Okay, so first off, I try to do as little manipulation as possible, but I do, like I set a black point in Photoshop, so like sometimes something's like a little bit off and I'll do that. If I have to, I'll do a little bit of masking, but usually I just like try to set a black point and put a curve on something, and then like I'll mask off the background, and especially with the objects, I feel like it's important that it's like really flat and feels a little like it's in space. Partially because it like taking away the context and just having it floating in here. And if it was on white, it would feel to me like a product. And then like, maybe I won't always use the black, but it's worked for me for a long time. I have to say quite a bit more costly to make work with a black background with all the ink that I use. But it's kind of sexy, and I know that that's not what I'm supposed to say, but it's just true.
I have another related question, which is how did you start experimenting with the flatbed scanner and taking it around?
So I actually started with the flatbed scanner. I just put something on the scanner and I was like, how does this work? And like, how will this seem? And it happened to be something that looked really good when I made the picture. And I didn't end up using it for that body of work, but then immediately I started scanning botanicals for that other work. And then that made the most sense of how to make that work. So I started bringing it with me. And I have a suitcase that like I can put it in its box and then bring it on a plane and it will be safe in there.
So in private chat, someone has asked me if you could talk more about the 3.9 Collective and who they are and what it means to you to be a part of that. And yeah, just say more about that collective.
Of course. 3.9 Artist Collective is a collective of Black artists living in the city of San Francisco. 3.9 was created, and artists and arts professionals, I should say. There's also writers, there's also curators, and other people who work in the arts. And 3.9 was created because there was prediction that by the 2020 census that the city of San Francisco would have a 3.9% Black population. And so some artists got together and they decided, let's make a collective to support one another of Black artists and art professionals living in the city of San Francisco. And I joined a few years ago, and it's been really great and really supportive. We sometimes put on exhibitions together. We meet up and talk about art stuff and find different ways to support one another and find opportunities together, etc. Yeah, it's please check out. There's a new website. You spell it out, 3.9 artistcollective.art, I believe, and also .com.
Great. Does anyone want to ask Kija a question directly and unmic? Do they have the ability to do that, Christina? Unmute? No? Okay. Can I call on someone? I'm looking at Michelle Mansour. I'm wondering if she has a question.
Yeah. If you raise your hand, I can unmute you.
Michelle, do you have a question? You don't have to have one, but I'm just curious. There you go.
I just, I love hearing Kija talk about her work. I've known Kija since she graduated from Mills and was a Root Division artist. So I feel proud of the growth, not only the growth in the work, but just as a professional and an educator. And, it's exciting to hear that there's students on the call. So just, yeah, I've heard anecdotally many of the stories along with this work, like throughout the years. And so it's always nice to kind of put it all together as one story. So thank you.
Michelle, thank you for letting me call on you.
Yeah,
Michelle Mansour, who's the executive director, CEO of Root Division, our neighbor when we're located near each other and housed in our respective galleries. So Sharia, I saw that you put yourself on camera. Did you have a question by any chance?
Yeah, I'm like interested in Carl Linnaeus and like, I guess like that history between like those, like his taxonomy work and then also like pseudoscience, racist theory. Like, did you find any like connections or crossovers or intersections between what he was doing?
Oh yeah. Well, like that was the first time, like when I was introduced to that, it was when I was an undergraduate at the Art Institute, and it was the first time that anybody had, like, I had ideas and I had things that I wanted to say, but it was the first time an academic had shown me something where I was just like, no, this is really solid. This is an invention, and this is like something. And I know maybe that's something that we all were supposed to know before college, but I was a high school dropout, so I just had my own sort of like ideas about this before I like went into this class. And yeah, there's a lot of crossover there. I feel like it's there's a lot of pseudoscientists that were creating different ways in order to like racialize people, and in the invention of race, and in order to, like, I don't know, make what they thought was a reason to not only categorize people, but I don't know, I'm sorry, I don't have the word for it right now, but we'll look at, yeah, there's a lot of, like, at the same time, there's like the like eugenicists were doing work, etc. And I've had so many people say to me, like, well, that's just how things were at the time, and like Linnaeus was doing, and you know what, I say fuck that. That was like really like a way that all of those pseudoscientists are the reason why I believe that all of this stuff stuck, and why, like, because it was like supposedly based in the sciences, like all of these like false truths which are lies, sort of are why we're still, to me, like a lot of the reasons why we're still having issues with race today throughout the world and in the US, because people still believe that those things are truths, because they're ideas that were passed down to us without understanding, like, that they were made up and where they came from. Does that answer your question? I guess yes is the answer, the real answer.
So Kija, thank you for your honesty, which people are really appreciating here. And
sorry
really
for my cursing. I can't help it.
It's okay. I almost like gave you a clap, but I was so the question I have for you and for everybody, I know we started a couple minutes late. There are a couple more questions for Kija, so I want to respect everyone else's time here. Kija, do you have a few more minutes to stay with us?
Yeah.
But I don't know your schedule.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if people need to time out, that's okay too. I just want to make sure that you get to answer a couple more questions here. If you don't mind, it's always hard with an hour long because there's always so much more. So 2 questions here. The first one is, how do you relate belongings, the objects, with belonging, like the feeling or the state of being? That's from Julie Clark.
That's a really good question, Julie. I think, like, to me, like the idea of belonging is something that I guess I'm constantly looking for, like that even naming that body of work In Search of Home is like trying to figure out, like, there's something about having a history, like understanding who you come from, that creates a sense of grounding in the world in a way. I don't know if I necessarily have found that, and I think a lot of us aren't allowed to. Our histories were erased, or we were not allowed to hold on to them. So like that is a difficulty. But like for the objects, I think those are, people bring in, we all have things that we carry with us through life that like remind us of a place or a thing that make us feel at home. Like even if we don't have house, we might have home, or we might not feel 100% home in a place, but we might have something with us that brings us comfort or reminds us of a thing. I mean, not all, like I said, not all of the objects are objects of comfort, but I do think that there's something to like make us feel more at home in a place. So I think that there is some crossover maybe, but I don't know that I've figured out the whole belonging thing yet. Although I will say, like, there are not a million, but several people in, you know, my life who make me feel like I belong. You know, it took a long time to get there. Yeah. Did that answer your question? Maybe that was like a weird...
Let's say yes, it did. The person who asked it, that person asked it twice, I think. So it's an important question to ponder, to think about. Julie says, yeah, 2 exclamation points. Okay, and thank you, Julie. And then the final question for you is, this is from Santiago, can you talk more about telling truths and lies via photography? How are you adhering to the truth of something, in quotes, like an object or a person? How do you feel you can tell truths? So it's a question about kind of truth versus falsity.
Well, I don't know, like, how exactly, like, to tell truths, I guess. I think, like, we have this sort of, like, I'm using this, like, sort of tropes of, like, scientific imagery in order to, like, think about what truth telling is. And I, like, photograph objects head on, and I do that, but I don't know. I mean, I guess the lie in my work is that it isn't, like, I'm using these same tropes that are used in scientific photography. The lie is the objectivity, where I'm trying to be objective, but I know that that's impossible. But I also think that's the lie in a lot of science. I don't want to sound like I'm against science right now. I'm really, like, pro science. I just think we have to think about where those ideas in science came from and, like, acknowledge the multifaceted and, like, dark histories of things. But I think that, like, there isn't anything objective about science. Like, science and culture influence one another, photography and science, photography and culture, etc. And so we have to acknowledge that and know that, like, no matter how much you're trying to tell a truth with a thing, there are other truths, and there are also other there isn't any objectivity, no matter, because even if you're pointing a camera at a thing and just, you're still choosing what goes in the frame. So I don't know, I'm not sure.
Okay, that sounds like as good a place as any to end it. We're not sure, and we keep working, and we keep trying to figure it out. Kija, I want to thank you so much for being with us tonight and for being willing to answer so many questions. And I think the exhibit that people have asked about is the California Institute for Integral Studies, and it's up through, when is it again, Kija?
End of the year, like end of the semester, so December sometime.
Okay, end of December, and it sounds like if you RSVP, Kija will be there on Fridays.
Yeah,
wearing a mask.
Yeah, I will be wearing a mask. You will be wearing a mask, but we can stand 6 feet apart and talk. And hopefully, I'll be able to photograph the objects. I forgot to double check about that before today, but yeah.
Okay, cool.
Bring something in, yeah, cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So everyone here is saying thank you. I just got a couple more words. Thank you to everyone for joining tonight and bringing your questions. Kija, this was exciting. I hadn't had a chance to see you present your work before, even though we've met a couple times. So this is really wonderful to hear the stories and how you generated the work, how you think about it. Christina Graber, thank you for all of your work being here this evening and hosting us with Camerawork. I want to remind everybody that we have a couple of events coming up with the auction. So again, Thursday afternoon, starting at 4 o'clock from 4 to 5:30, Dr. Lee Rayford, PhD candidate Delphine Sims, and artist Adrian Octavius Walker will be in conversation with us on the politics of Black representation. So see the link here. And then on September 17th, we'll have an amazing town hall event hosted by Adrian Burrell and James Leventhal. And we're trying to get all the artists there. So like on Zoom, like a house party, to really be able to talk about the work for the auction and what they've submitted. So that should be awesome too. So thank you for the claps there on that. We're excited to have as many artists as we possibly can in the house for that. The final thing, oh, right, and we just pointed to 3.9 Collective Art Online. The other thing I want to tell you is that we're going to log off in a second, But if you know the artist Jean Dominique, and I'm representing him because he is a board member of San Francisco Camerawork, he has a talk tonight that has actually just started at the East Bay Photo Collective, and it is his work on African-American farmers in the 20th century, or 21st century. We're in the 21st century. And here's the link. If you guys want to join, it's a quick registration and you can just hop on. So Kija, thank you again. We really appreciate it. Have I forgotten anything, Christina? No, we're good? Okay, everyone, thank you so much. Thank you for being here and creating a sense of community for us all. All right, take care, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Okay, bye.